Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to go through how I'd approach painting an Eldar Corsair from the Sky Raiders. And this is a Corsair warband that appeared years and years ago in a bunch of Forge World Imperial Armour books, and I always really liked the scheme and fancied trying it out. So when Games Workshop sent us the Kill Team Neckermann box, I thought this was a great opportunity to give it a go. So let's paint. Over a black primer, I'm going to base coat the model using Monument Pro Acryl Dark Grey Blue. A really big fan of this colour, and I actually quite like using the Pro Acryl paints. Through my airbrush, I'm thinning it about 2 drops of paint to every 1 drop of thinner. I'm spraying at 25 psi with a 0.4mm needle and nozzle, Harder & Steenbeck Cult of Paint Infinity. Now, once the base coat's dry, I'm going to pre-shade, or I'm going to give it a highlight with a white, in this case Tamiya flat white, thinned 4 or 5 drops of Tamiya X20A thinner to the flat white. I tried this a few different ways where I just layered up the blues and stuff, but I couldn't quite get the colour where I wanted it. And when I looked at the art and I looked at the model, it didn't look quite how I was picturing it. So the solution I found was to go in with the white over my base coat blue and then apply my highlight blue over the top of this white. Very, very thin layers. And what it's allowed me to do was keep that original blue colour in the shadows, but still get this nice transition between the highlight blue and have the highlight blue really quite desaturated in the brightest areas because the white would really show through. Very simple, just sort of zenithal shade, so top down, brighter. And then over this I'm using Scale 75 Bearing Blue. Now I don't normally like airbrushing with Scale 75 paints. They have a very, very matte finish, and often the additives in the paints that are making them very matte to look at and a very matte finish can muck around when you're airbrushing. So this is very heavily thin, so you're probably looking at about 3 drops of thinner, normal airbrush thinner to paint, and a few drops of flow improver just to help it along. But you can see, because we're going over that white, and blue is such a strong colour anyway, even with that very dilute mix, it's still showing up nicely. And I think we've achieved a pretty nice match to that original colour plate. The Sky Raiders have this sort of, I guess it's camouflage, but it's just a bunch of sort of zigzags really over their armour. And I've just chosen a nice dark grey to paint this in with. I've used Scale 75 Eclipse Grey, but really doesn't matter. It's just, you know, slightly off black, so very, very dark grey. Thin this down on my palette. And only tip I can really give with this is be fairly confident with your strokes. And all I was doing was, as I was moving my brush along the shape, I would press it in further and then let it out further to change the width of the stripe that I was painting. Once that's all dry, I'm going to give the model a couple of coats of gloss varnish. Now I'm using Vallejo polyurethane. You use whatever you normally do in your airbrush. We want a good solid coat of this on there because we're going to do some pin washing, and I don't really want the wash to stain the surfaces too much. I just really want it to run into the recesses. And the wash I'm going to use is Payne's Grey. Now Payne's Grey is a colour term, like burnt umber or something like that, but it does vary manufacturer to manufacturer. I'm using the Abteilung 502 fast drying Payne's Grey here, and it's a lot bluer, for instance, than my Winsor & Newton Artist Oil colour Payne's Grey. But for this it works well, which is why I've chosen it. I wanted it slightly more blue in it. And I've thinned it down using artist grade mineral spirits. I use Winsor & Newton Sandstorm because they're odourless, so it's not too uncomfortable using the washes for an extended period of time. And I just work my way around the armour, just touching that wash mixture. And you see the capillary action. It's pulling that wash off your brush into all the recesses. Then I leave it for about an hour, and then I get the hairdryer on it, high heat, gentle power. Once that's dried, I'm just going to give the whole model a couple of coats of satin varnish. It's just to unify the finish, because we've got obviously the gloss, the very matte of the oil, and then we've got, you know, whatever paint might be showing through as well. So we just want to unify the finish of the armour so it looks like just the armour is what we've painted. Once that's dried, I've painted in all the other details black. Just helps me get a better idea of what's going on with the model, especially when they're a little bit busy. And I am super happy where I'm at with this armor color. I got quite scared at this stage because I was like, oh man, I really like what scheme I've done here, and I hope I don't mess it up on the rest of the model. I am certainly think I'm going to go ahead and finish up painting the rest of this kill team. I'd love to play some games with Rich. He's got well into it, and I think these are a great way to scratch that Eldar itch. And I'm just going to do a little bit of edge highlighting here, coupled with battle damage. I'm not going to do rust and things like that on the Eldar. I don't think it suits them, but I do want to make him quite heavily battle damaged. It's in their background that they're fairly violent, you know, they're like melee and all the rest of it. So all I've done here is added a little drop of white into that bearing blue, and I'm just working my way around all the edges and just sort of tippy-tapping along them. If you're enjoying the tutorial and you'd like to see slightly more in-depth ones on our personal projects, more army painting or competition painting, then consider checking out the Patreon. And if you do support us on there, it's a massive thank you. It allows us to do videos on here and videos on Patreon every week. And we feel very fortunate to be able to do it. So thanks for your support. So not just tapping all the edges, I'm doing the odd scritch and scratch as well. This might seem like a complicated stage, but it's a stage I really enjoy on the model. It's fairly relaxing, and it took me less than 5 minutes to go around the entire model. You can see that extra definition that it's brought in. For the weapons, it's a very sort of dark grey-green colour in the colour plates, and it was something I wanted to mimic, if not directly copy. And I saw on my shelf this colour called grey-green by AK Interactive, so I've used that. I really didn't like this paint. It has a very, very matte finish. I didn't like how it painted on. So if you do want this exact colour, I would suggest looking at either Citadel or Vallejo model colour. See if you can find a similar colour there, because it'll paint on much nicer for that sort of thing. And to dull it right down, or add a lot of heavy shading I should say, rather than dull it down, I'm going to make a dark brown green wash. I tried Industrial Earth, which is this paint on its own, but it was too green. So I'm just mixing in a little bit of dark brown. I think it was bitume. And there's no need to do any varnishing or anything. We don't need to protect the model anyway, but also I want this oil to stain the surfaces and not just run into the recesses. And the very, very matte finish that's already on this grey-green paint is going to help with that. Now, I applied this 3 times. So just like before, I'd leave it for an hour or so, get the hairdryer on it, apply it again, leave it for an hour, get the hairdryer on it, and do it. I appreciate that that might seem quite intensive for what you're doing. I mean, if I was painting this kill team, I'd be doing them all in one go. So, you know, an evening session, I could happily get the oil paints done. And then just like on the armour, just a few little edge highlights, battle damage, whatever you want to call it. Again, just using the grey-green. Because that oil, as you can see, has dulled it down and darkened it a lot. The grey-green's plenty bright enough. We don't need to add any white into it. For the gems on this model, and like most Eldar models, in fact more than most Eldar models, there's a lot of them on these Corsairs, which is cool. I like it. It's blingy, you know, they're sort of merchant princelings or whatever it is, and your pirates, or you know, I get it. We're going to go for green. So I've base coated the gem with Scale 75 Despair Green, very, very saturated dark green, lovely colour. Over that, I'm going to use Games Workshop Cabalite Green. And you can see here I'm sort of painting, I don't know, 3/4 of that gem in like a crescent pattern. And I'm doing this gem all in one go. But typically what I do is I'd work around the model, do the dark green on all of it, the middle green on all of it, and then I do this little highlight green. For this I've used Games Workshop Moot Green. I really, really like this trio of colours. And I actually used them on his little bit of cloth that he's got tied around his arm as well. So we do a very thin crescent there, and if you make that crescent a little bit too thick, just go back in with your Cabalite, nudge your brush up against it, and you can thin it right out. It's a nice way of, if you struggle getting really, really precise lines, it's a nice way of doing that. And then a little white reflection dot up in the dark corner. So I've been around the whole model and done all the gems. Now for the leather, I didn't want to go with brown leather or anything on him. I actually quite liked how the black sort of was quite stark against the rest of the model. So to do black leather, all I've done is paint it Vallejo model colour black. Then I'm doing the first sort of tippy-tappy highlight using a brown, so US Olive Drab I used. And then I'm going to use Scale 75 Gobi Brown to do the last one. And this is just, again, tapping along the edges and doing the odd scratch. And I think it gives a really nice sort of faded brown leather look. And that was what I wanted with this model, was this sort of Baroque, ancient, look, different to the rest of the sort of clean Eldar look that we get. I wanted him to look like, you know, he collected these various trinkets and things, and they were quite, well, very aged in the case of Eldar. And then for the cloth, so the cape and the tabard, I've just painted them model colour black. I've highlighted them once with Eclipse Grey, and now I'm just giving them a really heavy brown wash, oil wash. I've done that a little bit around his feet as well. For the metals on him, they're very, very simple. The goldy bronzy colour is just Runelord Brass by Games Workshop with a wash of Agrax Earthshade over the top. I put a tiny drop of the Despair Green in the Agrax Earthshade. I don't really know if it makes any difference, but it was on my palette, so I did it anyway. And then the sword, again, super, super simple, is just burnt iron, so a dark silver colour with an Agrax Earthshade wash, and then a bright silver edge highlight along the edge of it. So very, very simple. Often when I'm doing these army painting things, I like to spend more time on the major focal points of the model. So in this case, it was the armour, and then the rest of the bits on him, keep it nice and simple. For the head, I just followed our pale skin tutorial, which I'll link up in the top for you as well. So I hope you've enjoyed me going through how to approach painting this Corsair Warband. I'd really love it if you do give it a try, that you give me a tag. I'd love to see it across me, maybe even an army, if you're able to make an army of them. And yeah, thoroughly enjoying doing this Eldar series. I'm so happy for all you Eldar collectors out there. It's, you know, they're a seminal army, aren't they, for 40k, to have them there, whether you play with them or against them. And it's so nice to have this lovely looking range of miniatures. I'm actually really enjoying painting them. I think Andy's getting quite jealous that I'm getting to do so many of them. So thanks ever so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button and hit subscribe if you're not already, because there's plenty more Space Elf stuff coming up. And I'll see you next time.